Should I just start? Great. That's the one bad thing about depending on technology. Well, I am going to, it's not up there for you, but I'll start talking to you about what we're going to be looking at. We've been looking at the parameters for us as God's people. And we've been looking at the command, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, which is from Leviticus chapter 19. And Jesus quotes it and says, there is no commandment greater than these. And when you go to the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 13, verse 9, he says, for the commandments are summed up in this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So if you want to obey the law and do what God says, you want to be able to love your neighbor as yourself. So what we've talked about is how, first of all, loving your neighbor as yourself starts off with the importance of properly loving yourself, by which I mean taking care of yourself, right? God gave us that responsibility. When I take care of myself, my neighbor doesn't have to, right? So one of the best things that I can do for my neighbor is to take care of myself and to take care of my business so he doesn't have to. And then we talked about how when I extend that, I'm picturing it as a bubble, like a bubble of love. It's also a bubble of responsibility. When we marry, we have to love our closest neighbor, which is our spouse. And we talked a lot about how we do that, how we draw them close, and how they become one flesh with us. The next step that we're going to look at, and I'm going to need a screen pretty soon here, is children, right? When we get married and we become one flesh, that one fleshness is acted out. I have it up here, guys. I just don't have it up on this screen. Let me get ahead so I can read. You just didn't get to see some of the really cool transitions that I spent all week. Now that's gone. Now here's the fun thing. We record this service to be put online publicly. Well, I'll just try and do it from memory. So when we have the idea of children, extending the bubble of responsibility towards children, that has been a part of God's plan from the very beginning, right? When you go back to Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 and 28, when God looks at the overall creation, what does he say? It says that God created us male and female. Male and female, he created them, right? Male and female. And I shouldn't have to emphasize that, but today I do, don't I? Right? Male and female, he created them, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. See, children were part of the plan from the very beginning. When you go to Genesis chapter 2, it says, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make a helper fit for him. And God makes a woman. And then Moses writes this in Genesis 2:24. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and the two of them shall become one flesh. Right? And that oneness is a lifetime of oneness, but it is also the production of a child who is a symbol of that oneness. When you go to the book of Malachi, chapter 2, verse 15, remember we looked at this where he was talking about divorce and not divorcing your wife? God says, did he not make them one and give them a portion of his spirit? And what did the one God want, it says? He wanted godly offspring. So do not be faithless to your wives whom God has given you. Right? That was what Malachi preached. And then the last time that Pastor Chris Hamilton preached on leaving a legacy of faith, he turned us to Deuteronomy chapter 6. Right? And in Deuteronomy chapter 6, what does God tell his people? He tells his people he tells them, these words that I speak to you this day shall be on your heart, and you shall teach them to your people, or to your children. Right? You must teach them to your children. And Chris pointed out that that is a process that has got to take place, right? And it takes some time. And today I want to kind of springboard off of that idea, the idea of parents teaching their children and the importance of doing that and why we have to do that. So I was going to introduce you to a new word today, and I was going to put it up on the screen. Oh, well, that's not the word. But we might be booting up again and getting there soon. We're not booting up and getting there soon. Wow, I'm going to have to do this whole sermon from memory. Here we go. All right. Let me grab my Bible. It's not in that room. All right, so if you have a paper Bible, you're going to have to use it, or your Bible on your phone. I can't wait to see the video of this one online. So, the word I wanted to introduce you to is exterogestational. And you can hear the word gestational is the gestation or the carrying of a child. Extero means external, outside. Now, when you talk about exterogestational creatures, normally we think of marsupials, like kangaroos, right? So a kangaroo will give birth to the baby, but the baby is not fully developed and ready to live on the outside, so it jumps in the pouch, right? And it can nurse inside the pouch. Possums do that, wallabies do that, wombats do that. Most of the animals that do that are in Australia, right? But we have a few here, the opossums that are here. But they are not the only animals that are exterogestational. Actually, human beings are also exterogestational. Right? When a baby is born, it is not ready to survive on the outside. Right? We are completely exterogestational. We have to continue developing once we are born. We are unable to stand. We are unable to walk. We are unable to protect or defend ourselves. We don't have teeth. We don't have claws. Right? So we don't have muscle coordination. right? Babies, that always cracked me up about babies because they're just kind of, they can't get their arms to coordinate or their legs to coordinate. We are externogestational in that when we are born, our brains are only 25% developed. Did you know that? Most mammals are 70 to 80% developed. And most animals can basically survive and at least get with the parents within a few minutes or a few hours of birth. They're up on their feet. They can trot and jog and jump and run. They know how to feed. Human beings, our vision is blurry. We can't see 8 to 12 inches in front of us. Our vision is blurry. I'm mentally reading my notes. And now that page disappeared. What's that? It's there. Oh, okay. Well, that's inconvenient. Well, here we go. I wasn't doing too bad for an old guy. There we go. There we go. We can't, don't panic. That's right. I am not panicking. God is sovereign. So I think he's trying to get me to shorten this sermon. I went 10 minutes overtime first time. So actually he's lengthening it. So poor you. We can't understand our environment, right? We can't. Is it up? Yay. Let me fast forward here. Yeah, here, these are the cool things. Look at that. Yeah, got married, have babies. Yeah, and here's all the Genesis passages. Yeah, Malachi, Deuteronomy, you shall teach them diligently to your children. Exterogestational, yeah, no muscle strength, can't walk, stand. Blurry vision. We're born with 25% brain development. Can't understand the environment. Can't effectively communicate. Yeah, that's a good one, right? So you basically know one word when you're born. Ah! And whenever my children did that, I would say, "Could you please be more specific?" We don't have any hardwired survival skills, right? We can't run away from a danger. We don't even sense a danger. The only thing we have is rooting, right? So I always thought that was so cool. You touch their cheek and they go, "Ooh," because they're looking for something to eat, and the sucking reflex is another thing. Or they'll grip, right? They'll grip things with their hand. If you put your finger in, I remember with my granddaughter Amelia, I took a little plastic knife and I put it in her hand and I held it up and I said, "Excalibur," and she's holding it and looking at it. This is how grandfathers play with their grandchildren. Yeah. Grasping. Or when they fall. Do you remember when they fall? Like, if you move a baby away, they go like that. And it's a Moro reflex. So they think that that's a sign that the child knows, I need to be close to someone. These are hardly survival reflexes. They will do nothing to protect you from a mountain lion. We just don't have it. We are very, very fragile creatures in the world. It takes us a long time to develop independence. Now, marsupials, right, outside of the womb and the development and teaching they get, they're ready within a year to be on their own. The great apes like orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, they're ready within 8 to 12 years to be free of the mother. Elephants, 12 to 14 years. Human beings, 18 to 25 years before we're absolutely ready to be on our own. We're just absolutely the worst in the animal kingdom. But the reason is because our brains are so big and so complex. It takes a long time to develop all the aspects of ourselves that need to be developed. Right? So in human maturity, by a year, we're walking, just barely walking. We are weaned within 2 to 3 years, which means we start eating solid food, but we can't even find our own food. Somebody has to give it to us. Sexually mature between 12 and 18, which means we are physically ready to have children. But I never wanted any of my 12-year-olds to go out and have children. Right? Because they still aren't developed cognitively or socially. They don't know enough to manage all the other aspects of life that are involved. So it takes between 10 and 20, and when we say 10 years, we mean, well, if you put the kid on the street on his own, he could figure out how to get out of the rain, and he could probably find a way to get food somewhere. But to really survive and flourish, he's going to have to be a lot older. She's going to have to be a lot older. And we don't get completed brain development until we're 25. Right? And that's why when kids are 25, that's when they come back and thank you for being a good parent. Because all of a sudden they start to realize, they put it all together and say, wow, I thought I knew more than I did. But now they start processing fully and completely as an adult. 25 years. So between 18 and 25 is when we are talking about being completely ready to function in a society. So when we look at humanity, what we have to remember is we are born knowing nothing. Your children know nothing. We must learn everything. That's not true of cats or dogs or parrots. We must learn everything. Everything about surviving in the larger world, everything about surviving amongst other species, and everything about surviving among our own species. Right? How to read other people. How to know when I'm being deceived or lied to. Little children don't always know that. We have to learn all of those things, and that means that we must be taught everything. Everything we must be taught. So whose job is that? And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children. First up is the parent, given that responsibility. Now, what are the words that they're supposed to teach? Well, this is Deuteronomy 6. If you go back the chapter before, that's Deuteronomy 5. And Deuteronomy 5, the words are recorded there, and they're the 10 Commandments. Right? So look at the things that God wants us to pass on to our children that will enculturate them. The things that will help them live the way God wants them to live. First of all, he says, I want you to teach them about me. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. I'm not like those things. I'm other than those things. There are people who worship those things, and they're certainly magnificent, but God says they're not me. And if you make them me, you're going to go astray. You must understand I'm behind those things. I'm greater than those things. And I don't want you to try to imagine me as one of those things. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. He's a person with feelings, not just a force. I'm jealous. Of what? He says, I don't want you to put anything else before me. I want you to be committed to me. I will visit the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me. Don't hate me. If you turn away from me, there is a price to pay, he says. But showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments, there is a reward for relationship with me. He wants us to pass that on to our children. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. For the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Now, we usually use this to refer to profanity, and I guess you could refer it to that. But when it says you shall not take his name in vain, the word for take is to carry. In other words, you should not bear or carry his name to no purpose. In other words, if you call yourself one of his children, one of his people, and you are doing an action that you claim is in God's name, and you are deceiving people, you are doing wickedness in God's name, God says, I will not hold you guiltless. You will be punished for that. Right? We're not allowed to put our hand on the Bible and say, I do swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. That so help me God part means if I lie, may God punish me more than you do. I don't think that people even know that anymore. And I don't think that people even care because they don't think about a God who will punish them, but he will. He will. He punishes those kinds of lies. So we're supposed to teach our children about telling the truth and properly representing the Lord when they're in public. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. And the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. We're supposed to teach our children about the management of time. The importance of work. 6 days you work. It doesn't say for pay, right? It's not about pay. It's about working and doing something that blesses. And one day, he says, you rest. And one day, you devote to God completely to make things right. A proper approach to worship. Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God commanded you, that your days may be long and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. A proper approach to authorities. I must teach my children that. They don't naturally know that. We're going to talk about that one in a little more detail in a little while. And then these are the ones we've been looking at, right? These are ways that you can love your neighbor. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Right? These are all things I must teach my child. Now remember, there's a 10th commandment that says this: you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, and you shall not desire your neighbor's house or his field or his male servant or female servant, his ox or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Your coveting or desire has to do with your heart. And remember, Jesus, when he applied these things in the Sermon on the Mount, he went to the heart of the matter. My wife teaches 2-year-old Sunday school class, and you would think, 2-year-olds, Yeah, you should hear some of the horror stories. Right? 2 years old, they're little angels. No, they're not. No, you've seen 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, right? So that you're playing with the toy and then you put it down and you go over here and another child picks up the toy you were playing with. Immediately, it's like, hey, that's mine. And what do? Do they go over and say, hi, could we exchange toys? No, they pick up a doll and bash the kid in the head. And the child drops the toy and they pick it up and run away to the other part of the nursery. Yeah, what's going on there? You know what's going on? A 2-year-old does not know how to process the emotions that they are feeling about a toy that they think is theirs. They're very egocentric. The world, they don't understand how to step outside of themselves. You know what? They have to learn that. Somebody has to teach them that. Somebody has to teach them this is not the appropriate way to handle your feelings. And I don't think you're going to do it by looking at them and saying, this is not the appropriate way to handle your... They don't even understand feelings. So stage by stage by stage by stage, we're constantly teaching them about their heart and dealing with their feelings and their emotions and their actions and their behaviors. This is what parenting is. And it doesn't stop when they're 4 or 5, right? You can struggle to deal with your feelings way up into your life. I remember when I graduated high school and went to my freshman year in college, there was a girl that I was dating. I thought she was so beautiful, and I thought, this is the girl I'm going to marry. But she was 2 years younger than me, and she was still here at home. And so like one of the first weekends in September, my mom and dad came up, and they brought my girlfriend along. And we had been writing, and I was so glad to see her. And I was faithful. I was not dating anyone else. I was certain this was the one. And we had a wonderful time while she was there for that weekend. And I waved goodbye when they left. And I went into my week refreshed until about Thursday. I got a letter, which we call a Dear John letter, that said, it's not you, it's me. I just gotta get on with my life. And then the next day I got a letter from her father who said, I really like you. I liked you dating my daughter, but you're young and you have to get on. And I'm like, no. And of course, it's like the plane just, and I'm emotionally spiraling down to crash. And I thought, I don't know what to do. I couldn't focus on my studies or any of those things. And so I called Larry and Mary and Eshelman Collect. And my dad got on the phone. And I don't remember the exact word for word conversation, but the general spirit of it is you're experiencing a broken heart. And that means that you experienced love. But you know what? Every person in the world experiences heartbreak. And you are at an amazing place. You're at a Christian college, a Bible college, surrounded by a sea of godly Christian women. Have at it. I asked another girl out at the end of the week. Now, you understand, there are kids who will kill themselves today because of that scenario. And all I needed was the simple words of truth and blessing on how to deal with my heart that was spiraling out of control from a person who had experience in life. That's all I needed. Wisdom, goodness. I learned to handle my wants and desires. I took a big step. These words that I command you today shall be on your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children. Our society does not believe that is the responsibility of parents any longer. I think that's a major problem. And I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but it seems to me that it's related somehow. After World War II, the Western nations in Europe and America, we did not like over-authoritarian leadership because of Adolf Hitler, because of some of the things that we saw. Authority running astray, and we want to be democratic. So in our thinking, we started to move away from the idea of authority. Authorities are bad. What we want is a democracy where everyone is equal. And we started moving that way in businesses. We started moving that way in schools. And we started moving that way in our homes. And now we are at the place where, yes, my wife and I are equals. But now they are telling us, and people believe this, that my children are also equals, because this is a democracy. And so if you try to impose your will on the child, if you try to tell them something, rather than allowing beauty to flourish from in their soul, they know nothing. They know nothing. If you do that, you are somehow an authoritarian abuser who wears a swastika. And so what's happening is our children don't have authorities, and we have developed a culture of disrespect where we don't have to respect parents. Teachers will tell children not to respect parents, right? If a 6-year-old child says that they want to change their gender, you don't tell your mom and dad, and the school will support the child. Because the child knows. Really? Children know nothing. They must be taught, and they must learn. What happens in a society when children take charge? You know, I want you to look at the 10 Commandments again. Look at this one. Honor your father and mother as the Lord your God commanded you, that your days may be long and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Now we look at that and say, oh, so if you're obedient, you'll live a long life and have old age. And maybe that's the intent. I think it goes further than that. I think he's talking about a sociological phenomenon. I think what he's talking about is when you honor father and mother, right? When one generation honors the previous, it creates strong bonds between those generations. And it creates a strong society where there's proper respect in the society. When you undo that, and the younger generations start to disrespect the older generations, there's no longer reason to exercise self-control. There's no longer reason to maintain an order. Everybody can do what they want. And what starts happening is you start to destroy the cohesiveness of the society. What do you think happened to the Canaanites? How did the Canaanites get the way they were? My guess is that they didn't worship the one true God. They started to worship their own desires. They developed all kinds of strange practices, and God finally said, you can no longer hang together as a society. I'm sending my people in and driving you out, and they are taking your land. What does he mean that it may go well with you in the land? I don't think it's magic. I think it has to do with what happens to a society when we overturn the concept of parents teaching children and children respecting what they're learning. You know how I know that? Because I read the news. I read the news. See, here's what's hard. It happens so slowly that we don't always see it at work. Right? So if you're older, most of you are nodding your heads and going amen, because you know that you grew up in a world that was not like the world today. And you know that you had to respect your parents. Oh my word, if you spoke against your parents, if you got in trouble at school and did something against the teacher, you were going to get it from the teacher, and then you were going to get it again when you got home. How dare you disrespect a teacher? Now, talk to public school teachers. Now, when the teacher tries to correct the student or to usher in anything, and I mean, they serve it with biscuits and tea. And so gentle. And a parent will come in and say, how dare you? How dare you question my child? Say my child is wrong. Say my child made a mistake. And now the parents defend out-of-order children. What are teachers supposed to do? These words that I command you today will be on your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children. Our society no longer believes that parents should play this role. And so parents, as a result, are abdicating. Well, I shouldn't really do that. I heard the story from a doctor, a medical doctor who saw, I think it was like a junior high patient. Might have been an elementary school patient. I don't remember the exact situation. But it was a kid who in school was having trouble getting along with his fellow students. If he wanted to do something a certain way and the other student wouldn't do it, he'd throw a temper tantrum. And then when the other student would give in, he'd be fine. And this happened all day. He was angry, he cried, he was happy, he was angry. And so the mother did some research on it, and she came into the doctor with the boy, and she said, my son's having problems in school. I've done some research. I believe that he has bipolar disorder, rapid cycling, and he's in need of medication. And here's a list of medications that I looked up. I would like you to consider these. And the doctor, wisely, I think, interviewed the child, checked him out, and he said to the woman, he said, I don't believe that your child has bipolar disorder, rapid cycling, or otherwise. I think your son does not know how to process feelings of frustration. And he needs to be taught that. I don't think he needs medication. Do you know what the mom did? Grabbed her son's hand and went out in a huff and found a doctor who would give the child medication. I wish I could tell you that was that's an outlier. Talk to any school teacher, and they run into these kinds of situations all the time. It is now chic to have a disorder and to be on medication. You don't want your child to be on the outs. It's a common occurrence. Parents are abdicating their role. And when they abdicate their role, they'll say, boy, I just don't know what to do with my child. And so they go to the teacher and they throw it on the teacher. And now the teacher has to step in and parent the child. And when the teacher has to parent the child, and this child will not respond to any teaching, because they don't have to. They don't have to respond at home. So why should they respond to a teacher? What is the teacher supposed to do? Well, here is what the school district tells them to do. You send them to the psychologist or the doctor. And you get medication to control them. And then when they get out of school and either don't want to be on the medication or they don't want to control themselves, the next person who has to step up to the parents who abdicated are the police and the justice system and the government, who say, let's help all these people by putting more money into pharmaceutical research to develop more drugs for kids. I think we're caught in that cycle. I'm not saying there aren't kids that need medication. There are. I'm just saying I think there's an awful lot of kids who don't need to be on medication, whose parents just aren't parenting. Because they don't believe in it. Well, why don't they believe in it? Well, first of all, they say, well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert. You know what? You're more of an expert than your kid is. You know more of it. What are you talking about? You went through the process. You know where you failed. You know what you learned. You know how you learned. Thousands of generations have done this. If it took a master's degree to raise a child, the human race would have been wiped out tens of thousands of years ago. Teach them the words. Not just rote memory, but help them. Help them. Walk them along. Some parents say, well, I don't want to mess my kid up. Okay, when you live in a country where one of the Supreme Court justices can't define what a woman is, and when Harvard doctors in Harvard Medical School are certain that men can menstruate, bear children, and chest feed, you think they're not going to mess your kid up? I'm far more worried about the experts than I am about parents. Well, my child will be different. They won't fit in. They won't be popular. Oh, is that what you're going for? So you want your child to be popular. Where popularity is defined by their peers whose idea of coolness changes every 10 minutes or 15 minutes with whatever new thing is advertised. Really? You know, if you love your child and you give time to your child and your child knows that you're invested in them, that you're investing your heart and soul, that they're going to love you. And although they might temporarily not like you at moments when they're 25, they're going to, I've had my kids do this. My kids did not like me and my wife at times. There's times where your kids are going to say, I hate you. You don't understand me. Yeah, no, I was never 14. Of course I was 14. I understand. You don't understand. I'm not worried about my children being cool. I want my children to obey God and know how to do what's right. You know, one of the most amazing things that my parents taught me? I went to Catholic school, but I was taught a very strict morality. And I was made fun of because of my morality. Because my parents, all they really taught me about sex was that that's for marriage. And so that's what I said. And when people around me started engaging in things, I wouldn't. And I was called homo. And all other kinds of names. And you know what my parents taught me? My parents didn't march down to the school and say, you need to stop those bullies from calling my little boy a homo. You know what they did? They taught me to turn the other cheek. They taught me to be strong. They taught me they're lying to you. They don't understand. They taught me how to bear up under persecution. And it made me really strong. Really strong. In my heart. Because I didn't care what other kids said. I cared what my parents told me that God said. Because I trusted them. I love them for that. Your kids will love you too. You might feel that they're going to hate you, and they may say it temporarily. But you know more than they do. Who knows more about life? Who knows more about the world? Who knows what's best for your child? It drives me nuts when I see a child in the middle of the wintertime come in here not wearing a coat. And a parent, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm just like, Why does that child not have a coat on? It's 25 degrees out and snowing. Why are they here without a coat? Well, they didn't want to wear a coat today. I'm just letting them have their choice. Why are you letting them have their choice? They can't process the future. They can't process hypotheticals. They can't look and say, oh, right now I don't feel like going through the trouble of putting a heavy coat on. But out there it's snowing and 25 degrees. They only know what they feel now. And they run it. They can't process that far. You must do it for them. Oh, but I don't want them to hate me. We're abdicating our role. Now you say, oh, it's a small and harmless thing. Yeah, it's a small and harmless thing. But if you keep going on and on and on and on and on, and you don't teach the child and don't teach the child, and they say, hey, I'm the boss. That child who you let run around and do whatever they want at 4 is going to be a hellion at 16. And when you try to tell them and you try to grab the reins now, it's too late because they're galloping away. And then you'll call the doctor and you'll get my child needs medication. No, you failed your child. Some of us know that. We know the mistakes that we've made. What's the answer? The answer, the culture's not going to teach these things. Do you understand that? They no longer support it. It's not like when I was growing up. The culture doesn't support it. We must be a culture in the church that says we believe these things. We believe parents should teach children. I have a responsibility to teach children. Pastor Chris made a really good point in his sermon on leaving a legacy of faith when he quoted that situation that children that are raised with a support team of 5 adults are greatly benefited. Who are your 5 adults? Who are they? Another thing that bugs me is when someone comes into the church. I understand people who are here for a first Sunday, but when you're here for weeks and weeks and weeks, and you have a child, and you say, oh, well, I don't want to put him in the Sunday school. Why? Then I preach a message on fornication, and someone comes up to me and says, how dare you preach a message on fornication when my elementary school child was here? And my thought is, how dare you bring a child into this service when I'm preaching on fornication? We have a class for them. You know what? Some people go the other way. The only person who can possibly raise my child is me. No, I can't trust them to anyone else. I can't trust them to a nursery worker. I can't trust them to a Sunday school teacher. I'm not sure I can trust them to their grandparents. It's only me. You are going to smother that child. You're going to squeeze them so tight they're going to say, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get away from mom and dad. Look, this has got to be, yes, you have a primary role as parents, but we as a church, as a body of people who are all saying, we want to stand against what the society is doing. We want to stand together and support each other as parents. We're trying to do things together. We need to rely on each other. When we get infighting amongst one another, that is exactly what the enemy wants to do. We have got to stand strong as a culture and affirm parents and adults together standing for the truth. I know that's the world I grew up in. And if I was doing something wrong, the neighbor's mom was going to call my mom. In no time, and it was dealt with. We stood together. And I would encourage us to stand together. I think that's a value that forms a parameter for God's people as we walk together. Let's close in a word of prayer. Father, thank you for this simple truth. I know there's a lot of questions that come off of it, a lot of questions about methods and things like that. Father, help us to grasp just the principle and to believe it and to step forward with it and to affirm the importance of our role as parents, teaching our children, even if it's hard. And I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.